So today what we are going to cover is, if you were a log, what it would look like going through the LogRhythm system. We're going to cover processing, indexing, search, and QA. I'm okay if you guys just ask me questions as we go, so you don't forget them. And it's kind of fun just to jump in as we're explaining some of these parts. My name is Steve Kaufman. I'm technical product manager here at LogRhythm. I directly work with our data indexing team, where Elasticsearch is housed for our product. I also work with the solutions team as well as our DevOps team. So any questions you have around our hardware or the data indexer, I'm kind of your guy. And then if you have any questions around future SaaS offering type things, I can come out there too.
You guys on the way out. Sounds good? I'll get everyone on the way out. So you guys can just
perfect. Yeah, all right. Sounds good. Thank you. So again, what we're going to cover today is, I'm going to go through various versions of LogRhythm knowledge. We got folks on 7.2? 7.3? Very good. 6? Oh, okay, I won't be covering 6, but we can talk about it. I'll say where it's different, and what we changed and why we changed something. But yeah, we'll cover the 7.2 data flow for indexing, and then we'll in 7.3 and 7.4 for indexing, and then the same for search. So we'll start with 7.2. In version 7, this is where we introduced Elasticsearch. In version 6, you guys have the Log Manager SQL database backend, and so for multiple reasons why we put on Elasticsearch. One was for increased search performance and better scaling. Another thing was to get something that isn't required to run on Windows at the time, so something that runs both on Windows and Linux, as we're pushing some more stuff towards the Linux route. But starts out with the agent. It's similar for you guys. Agent sits out on your host and your environment in different areas, collecting all the logs. It is forwarding off to your data processor. Now, inside the data processor, there's a lot of stuff going on. First, it hits a queue called the end process queue. This is also where it starts getting piped off to archives. So in the data processor, we are bounded by however fast you can process or archive. That's as fast as we can go there. If one's bottlenecking the other, they're both bound to that. For those of you that are in LogRhythm 8, we're doing a lot of stuff around archive because right now that's our boundary to improve that, make it go a little faster. Then it hits our message processing engine. This is really where the magic happens for LogRhythm. So we really pride ourselves in having all these processing rules, supporting all these devices. You guys don't have to go figure out how to parse data, stick it into a schema. This is where logs come in. We put it into LogRhythm schema. This is what makes it really nice and user-friendly to search, query, and visualize your data. From there it goes into the process queue. And then it gets ready to be shipped over something in 7.2 and 7.3 that we called reliable messaging. For larger deployments, for distributed systems, this maybe have been an area where some performance issues have been had. Essentially what happens is the DP says, all right, I got this log processed. I'm done with it. It's ready to be stored. And it sends it off over ZeroMQ, which is a transport queuing layer that we use in 7.2, to the data indexer. In the data indexer, the first service that it hits is one that we call denorm. It's short for denormalization. When we're doing most stuff in SQL you want to get things down to the smallest store without duplicated data, so you usually end up with ID pairs. Then you do table joins out to enrich it with metadata. Elasticsearch actually loves having as much information in the message as possible and having duplicate data if possible, and it can actually return results a lot quicker that way. So what we're doing in denorm is we're actually enriching that data with the metadata. So we're taking the ID pairs and saying, like, instead of host name 12, say, host name Kaufman DX or something like that. And so that is all enriched, sent in Elasticsearch for you. Folks who have put Kibana on top of their systems, you see this data all the time. We then send it to a service called Anubis. For a period, we gave engineering teams probably a little bit too much leeway in what we name services. Sorry for it. We're going to be very descriptive. They're going to make sense going forward. Background, I think what it was, Anubis is an Egyptian god that was responsible for taking souls to the afterworld. Sorry. But the role of Anubis is the reliable messaging part. So what Anubis does is when it gets a message, it fires back to the data processor and says, hey, I got it, I own it, please stop sending it. And then also persists it to a database, a Bolt database that we call Gigawatt, because like a bolt to lightning gigawatt. Sorry. And it persists it there, and it says, okay, I own it now. Nubis then fires a message to a service called Go Dispatch. Its job is to route logs and transfer them into something that Elasticsearch can ingest. And then it also acknowledges back to Anubis and says, all right, I now got this log into Elasticsearch. Please delete it from the Bolt DB. And please stop trying to send it again. And then when it finally gets in Elasticsearch, this is when you can actually query the data from your web console or client console. That's always the first step in testing to make sure that your pipeline is happy. Can you actually see the log messages coming out of the web console or client console from the data indexer? If you can't, you likely have something going on downstream. If any of you are trying to troubleshoot your own systems, I would recommend start at the end and work your way back, especially between this Anubis and Elasticsearch. A lot of times Anubis looks like it's having trouble, and it's actually Elasticsearch is not running or not healthy or something's going on there. You have like a red index. Any questions around 7.2? All right. Going on to 7.3, we had a couple big things we wanted to focus on. One was in 7.2, we saw some load balancing issues between DPs and DXs. So we actually get in a situation where two DPs could be pointed at one DX and overwhelm it and tip over Elasticsearch, and then things start falling over. After that, the whole system goes unhealthy. And so we wanted to remove the need for components to know about downstream components. And so a lot of the work we did here, you'll see in a little bit, is put a API HTTPS abstraction layer between our components that does the load balancing for us, so you no longer need to know about what the downstream components are. In 7.2, for folks that are 7.2 are interviewing like a pinned DP to DX situation right now. If you are, this will remove that need. You no longer have to do that. So again, agent fires down to data processor. This hasn't really changed. We're also, who's installed the 7.3 system or seen it happen? Have you seen Larry? Who has seen Larry? Okay, I'll talk why Larry came along too as we go along here. So part of adding this abstraction layer is we needed a way to configure the master cluster at install time, and we leveraged a configuration management software called Console to do this. This is where Larry comes in. So when you set up your installation of a system, you define the cluster at that time, and so you run the LogRhythm infrastructure installer. That's what Larry stands for, and it develops a deployment package for each of the hosts on your cluster, and it has a configuration file in there called plan.yaml. If any of you have seen that, and that's what distributes configuration to all the hosts, and that's why Larry's there, is to create that configuration, and then right now you have to manually kind of push that configuration out to all your hosts. Go talk to Sam Straka. He's going to fix a lot of this stuff in our new LR deploy, so we know the pain. Sorry. But you do get a lot of cool load balancing around this. And another thing that we got out of this was the ability to get 7.3 common criteria and FIPS certified. So for folks that are at 6, that's the last time we did it. We're doing it. We're in process right now for 7.3, and we're going to do it for 7.4 also. So now we give this message to the API gateway. The API gateway now figures out who's healthy or who is able to receive a message downstream. No longer does the DP need to know what DXs are downstream. Sends it down there. It hits the API gateway on the DX side. And then this is where some of the FIPS and CC stuff comes in. So a big part around FIPS and CC is everything has to be encrypted in flight, and we have to have authentication and authorization. So you'll see a new service in 7.3 called the authentication service, and what this does is it creates tokens for not only users but also services that are running inside LogRhythm. So in this case, the data processor is saying, hey, can I please send a message to the data indexer? It goes out to the auth service, and the auth service creates a JWT token for the data processor. The data processor puts that in the header of its request, sends it downstream to the DX. DX gets it, and then it goes and checks that token against the auth service to say, is this a known token? Is it a signed known token? And if so, the message then gets transmitted back into the data indexer pipeline. We got a new service called Transporter. Transporter's main role is to talk to the API, take that message, and then turn it back into 0MQ for us to put it the rest of the way down the pipe. You won't see too many other changes here. Nubis is still there. It's still going to send back acknowledgments, go down to go dispatch, and back to Elasticsearch. We did see a lot of improvements around load balancing in 7.3 compared to 7.2, but we do still see issues in 7.3 on large deployments around the DP reliable persists. That who knows about reliable persist? All right. That happens when downstream services get backed up and start pushing back. The DP starts right into disk until it can service those requests down. A lot of that is because, as you can see, we got a lot of services running on the data indexer, doing lots of things, hogging resources, causing bottlenecks. But 7.3 is much better than 7.2. But going on to 7.4, which is one I am extremely excited about. 7.4 is one where we really kind of turned engineering loose. Like we've kind of restructured our tier 4. Go ahead.
On 7.3, do you
Yep.
see much bottlenecking due to the additional authentication pieces?
We actually don't. So for service accounts, we refresh the token every 24 hours. For user accounts, we refresh it every 1 hour. You can revoke tokens through the client console, but we haven't yet. And we have 2 deployments in house running 120,000 MPS that we do. We test previous versions against current versions that we're developing on to test improvements. And compared to the old pipeline, the API gateway hauls an L. It's pretty sporty. Going on 7.4, we've opened up the reins for engineering to get directly involved with our tier 4 process and actually work with customer issues. So they got to see a lot of these firsthand, and they got experience of the pains that some of the larger deployments are feeling. And they kind of came to the organization and said, we see some issues. We know how to fix these issues. Just let us do it. And especially for a lot of my teams, that's what 7.4 was all about. Was fixing a lot of the pipeline issues that we've seen in 7.2 and in 7.3. So we'll start going through this. Solve the agent still forwards to the data processor. This isn't going to look too much different, but there is some changes in here. Same thing about an API gateway. Fires a message over to the data indexer. We go check the token, make sure that you can do this. We hand it off to Transporter, but then Transporter goes directly to Elasticsearch. So let's talk about what we lost and why. So you no longer see DNorm. Part of the reason you no longer see DNorm is, one, this is an enrichment function. We had a lot of architectural conversations about where enrichment belongs, and actually we came to the conclusion that it belongs in data processor. Data processor is actually already normalizing data, so we had denormed data, we're normalizing it, then we're denorming it again, so we just removed all that effort, and then we just went straight to sending denormalized data all the way down through the pipeline. So there's a service that we no longer need. I think each denorm was hogging something like 10% CPU, so poof, we got some more resources back. You'll see that Anubis and Gigawatt is gone. Funny thing is, when you go to APIs and HTTPS, there's a very nice request response loop there already. So that's where we can handle the ownership of who has the log. We no longer need this reliable messaging thing at all to handle that. So when we hit the API, once we say success, we got it, guess what? DP stops firing at us. That has removed a ton of not only one, resource overhead, but 2, we had another database there where we're actually competing against Elasticsearch for writing to disk. So we removed all that. And then, since we no longer needed to acknowledge back yet again to Anubis to stop sending to Elasticsearch, we got rid of Go Dispatch and we put the transformation layer from Go Dispatch in Transporter. Like I said, we have these 220K systems set up. You take a 7.3, which is still pretty darn good. You shut down Elasticsearch on that. The thing ain't recovering if you turn it back on. You're gonna have to take off load. You're gonna have to start deleting DX reliable persist. Until Elasticsearch comes back up to a green state. We've shut off 7.4 for hours and turned it back on, and it will recover. Elasticsearch just doesn't have nearly the computing resources on it that it did before, and it's actually able to do its job. Another cool thing that we're doing in 7.4 is each Elasticsearch instance has a 32 gig, it's actually a little bit less than that, but a 32 gig usable Java memory heap. Elasticsearch is a Java service. If you start getting to the top of that heap, Elastic goes unhealthy very quickly. What we're doing is actually monitoring the heap. If we get into an unhealthy state for a period of time, we start what's called closing indexes. And what closing indexes does is it removes the resource pressure off of Elastic for managing that index for search, but it does make it so you can no longer search that. In 7.3, what we'd have to do is reduce your TTL, delete that data anyways. Chris Peterson alluded to it in his keynote that we're going to introduce a warm node. When we introduce that warm node, these closed indexes now go over to that warm node, and when you search across warm, that warm node manages opening and closing of those indexes so that you can now search that data. And this is what's going to enable us to have 90 days, 180 days, or more of live data that you can actually search through the web console. Questions about 7.4?
Was that the improvement from 7 to 4? Were there a lot of issues with Elasticsearch?
So from 7.2 to 7.4?
Yeah, 7 to 4.
So a lot of stuff changed from 7.2 to 7.4, including the version of Elasticsearch. So we went from Elasticsearch 2.6 to now we're on 5.6.6. And in 7.2 you had all the denorm and Anubis stuff going on in the data indexer also. That's all removed. So yeah, there's probably more of that that's causing Elasticsearch problems in the version of Elasticsearch. But yes, we did change a lot of stuff.
Cool.
Is there a process to go from 7.2 to 7.4, or do you have to do it?
You can go from 7.2 to 7.4. What you can't do is go from 7.1 to 7.3 or 7.1 to 7.4. The reason for that is 7.1 we use Elasticsearch 1.34, I believe, and it's Elasticsearch only supports one version below it for compatibility of the data. So what you have to do there is you got to upgrade to 7.2, hang out for a while, and then you can go from 7.2 to 7.3 or 7.2 to 7.4.
So you mentioned about warm node and I forgot the other one. So does it mean you have to have two, like, does it mean you have to have two clusters for the data indexer?
For the warm data, or yeah, if you want, just as it stands now, you can have one node like on an XM or one Linux node or cluster nodes. If you want to have the extended TTL and have the warm node be able to manage the closed indices, we are going to have sizing guidance for that, or we'll offer an appliance that has, right now we're looking at one that has like 120 terabytes of data on it, and then you can have one or many of those that will manage all the closed nodes. So you would need a warm node in your infrastructure. I will also mention that this needs to be Linux also.
But if you want, you can still have one EX node, right?
Yeah, you can still have one. Yeah, that's totally fine. Yep.
But that's not coming until version 8, correct? Wasn't that
That's on 4.
very future plan?
The warm
nodes?
node?
Yeah.
So we are going to offer the warm node in our 7 series. What's coming in LogRhythm 8 is a better granularity in managing the warm data. So your search experience will look pretty much as it does today. You may get, like, if you search way back into warm data, I've seen it take as long as 5 minutes to return some queries. It's still way better than second look. But you may have to go and up your timeout on the web console to get the data to come back. What we want to do in 8 is show you where you break from hot data to warm data, and then we'll do some automatic adjustments around the search query so you don't have to go, fuss around with that.
Cool.
Any more questions on indexing before I pop over search? Search isn't as exciting as the indexing side. I mean, it is, but it's not as complicated. So search in 7.2, we have our client console, beloved client console. We have our web console. And then I call out threat map differently. Does anybody use threat map? Cool, all right. So threat map actually, you'll see it here, it hits a different route than client console and web console. So that's the only reason I call that separately. The client console, web console leverage a service that's built into both them, shared code though, that's called the message engine. Really the main purpose of the message engine is to coalesce data together, especially across like federated search across clusters. So you hit this cluster, brings in message into the one that goes and sorts that and coalesces all that data together. Threat map goes and hits the DX directly, the first service that we see, this was still back when we let people name anything Columbo. There's an old show, I think in the 80s, it was called Columbo Investigations. It goes and hits Columbo directly to receive data, actually through a side API that we built just for threat map when we made that process. But this is still all over 0MQ in 7.2. Then Columbo goes and structures this into a query that Elasticsearch understands, and Elasticsearch returns the data to Columbo, and then Columbo sends this out to whoever the client was that asked for it. Columbo also has some stuff in there for handling lists, so if you send a query with a list, it structures the query for Elasticsearch to take into consideration all of those items in your list. So moving on to 7.3 and 7.4 on the search side looks exactly the same. I guess a question is, if you know that your Elasticsearch cluster is healthy, has anybody ever hit like search performance issues with Elasticsearch? Shaking your head, yeah.
I had.
Yeah. All right. What are some of the issues? I'm just curious.
Usually revolves around just larger data sets, traffic logs.
Yeah. Yep. All right. No, that's fair. So.
Drill down failures.
Yeah. Yeah, and there is some other components within the web console where they do a caching layer that maybe contribute to some of those, and we're trying to remove that stuff also. For anybody that's familiar with the web indexer, that's the next thing on our hunt list to remove. Just have an API that goes directly into Elasticsearch. Similar to threat map, let Elasticsearch handle all that search data, because it's kind of what it's made for. Was there anybody else that had any comments around searching?
I had. So the issue I had was I couldn't do any search from both the web GUI or the client console because my account was corrupted for some reason. So every time I would do a search, it would just time out. Although I increased the time to like 3 minutes. So I ended up going to SQL database and removed my username and had to recreate it. So that was the fix.
Oh, weird. It must have been like a token issue.
Could have been. I'm not sure.
All right. All right. Yeah, that's one thing to check. Like if maybe you dig into the logs, and there's a lot of good stuff we're doing around centralized logging and diagnostics, so you don't have to dig through the logs. But if you're not seeing data in 7.3 or 7.4, go look at the API gateway log, or the web console log also shows it. See if there is if a token is being generated and accepted. Because a lot of stuff we change around the auth service, we might just need or waiting for a token to get refreshed. So 7.3, 7.4, go. That's a good lead in. So now, when Steve.Kaufman logs into the web console, and I initiate a query, it's first going to go make a token for me, make sure that I'm a known user in the system, and then it's going to pass that token in the header of my request over the API gateway, similar to how we changed the transport layer of the indexing from 0MQ. We did the same thing for search. Message engine is still there, but added in as the API gateway. Again, this is great for load balancing. We don't need to know where we're sending it. We just send it to the API. API takes care of who can service the request. Any DX can service the request if you have multiple. And then sends it over to the API gateway on the data indexer side, sends it to Columbo. Columbo will ask Elasticsearch for the data and then send everything back. If anybody's familiar with the Grafana dashboards on the data indexer, there's an indexing and a search dashboard that will show you DP to Elasticsearch that logs and everything are flowing. The same thing for searches. So if you're not getting searches coming through or you're not seeing data into the data indexer, those two areas will show you pretty precisely where it's unhealthy or where you're having issues. I have these cool, like high-level diagrams for folks that are interested that want to put this on your wall. So all these things will be shared. And if you ever have any wondering what the heck is going on with data inside of LogRhythm, you can always reference this. So if you want, all this will be made available to you, and you guys can use it to your leisure, some fun nighttime reading. Yeah, exactly, right? Questions? Concerns? Do I know any other goofy things that we've named stuff?
Do you have any recommendations for encouraging management that it's actually a good idea to jump ahead to 7.4 when it becomes generally available?
Yeah.
If you've had a really painful upgrade to 7.3?
Well, the nice thing is, if you're already on 7.3, you've gone through a lot of pain, so you've upgraded SQL, you've gotten there, so, I mean, you've already kind of got over the hurdle. 7.4, you still got to create your deployment package. Do you have a clustered environment, or you got a
Single DX.
Oh, single DX. It's going to look pretty much the same for you. If you have a clustered environment, one thing that we did change is you no longer have to put the LRII_DX on every single freaking node and go run it from every one. You just have to put the plan file on one node and run your installer similar to like the good old days, and it'll go and install across the entire cluster. So that's a lot easier in 7.4 for anybody that's worried about that. But from the performance aspects, like the engineering team, every time they get on a support call for 7.3, they're like, we just need to get every customer in 7.4 because a lot of the ingestion side is so much better in 7.4. So like those guys would light me on fire right now if I didn't say like, please everybody go to 7.4 because it's going to be great for you folks as well as great for LogRhythm support team. 7.4 has. I mean, we started testing 7.4 in the 120K test deployment in January. Then we started onboarding early access customers in March, I believe, and they've been running it since then. Part of the reason why we've waited longer to release 7.4 is to try and kick out as many what we call critical bugs as possible before we release it as GA. So we have put a larger emphasis on quality in 7.4. And I mean, it's from lessons learned, right? It's great to constantly have new features, but if the thing can't handle high performance and spikes and just some stuff that you guys throw at it, you can't use those features. So we kind of shifted and put a huge focus on quality. So, I mean, I'd install 7.4 before I install another version of 7.3. But 7.3, I mean, if you're on 7.2, please go 7.3. I mean, it's better each way you go.
You just answered my question.
Yeah.
I was about to ask if for those of us on 7.2, is there a reason to go to 7.3 or should we just hold out for 7.4?
7.4 is so close. I mean, I'd hold out. Unless you're like,
That's what I'm doing.
Unless you got a change window that you got to hit, then I understand.
If there was, we just wait to tech-go or something, I guess.
Yeah.
So is deployment manager going to be what you would use for 7.4 deployment?
So the new LR deploy is right now focused on 8 because we're doing a lot of stuff around using Sol to manage that deployment. The current install wizard has had some minor improvements based on a lot of feedback that we've gotten from folks doing it themselves. So it is better. Like the thing around the DX and installing clusters is a lot nicer. But when you fire up the install wizard, Larry's still going to be the first LogRhythm infrastructure installer. Don't want anybody that has the name Larry, I don't want them to be associated with that. But LogRhythm infrastructure installer will still be fired up, and you can create your deployment package and all that stuff and spread it out to your various components.
So if you did go to 7.4, right now we're at 7.25. If we did go to 7.4, we're looking for stability.
Yep.
7.25 is very stable.
Yep.
And so we want to go to 7.4, but we don't want to be the first ones out there that might have to work out.
I understand. Yeah, I understand. Again, all I can say is like we've delayed it to try and solve that. So one thing that 7.3.5 just came out, and one thing that we wanted to make sure was that all known issues that we corrected in any of the 7.3 versions also make like were in 7.4. And then to ensure that all the changes that we did in 7.4, we just kicked it as hard as we could. I'm sure you guys are great at finding stuff, so I'm sure you're going to find something. But
Can you remind me again the FIPS and CC
yeah, so
certification?
we are in
Which version?
7.3 and 7.4, not 7.2. So for you guys, go 7.3 or 7.4. Yeah.
7.4.
Yeah. And just to preface, we are in the process of certification for this now, so it hasn't not completed. So yeah, but
Do you have a timeline for that?
I don't.
Ish?
Yeah, ish. It better be like in this year. I mean, we're coming close, but we go back and forth with the folks that are doing the check for us, and so it's been a constant supply of information and come back. But it's been in test now for a few months. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.